This is one of a nearly dozen protests in New York City today alone. This one's in Weeksville near Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. On this map, it's one of the areas you see in orange or red. Those neighborhoods are both the lowest in income citywide and have the highest number of police calls. The researchers who put it together after detailed analysis concluded the two are linked strongly.
93% of the arrests were black and brown people.
David R. Jones talks about subway turnstile jumping and other minor crime arrests. He really knows what he's talking about. He sits on the board of the MTA, as well as leading the research that concluded that lower income communities of color are more likely to be policed.
This is all part of the mosaic that has gotten people so agitated who grew up in these communities.
People like Anton Lowe, who came to the gathering and protest in Weeksville.
I'm not surprised at all. Like, even now, look how much police van is out here. And what we're doing is standing here talking. So, it sends us the wrong sign, sends the wrong signal.
The research shows something more, that police respond most frequently in low-income communities that are gentrifying. Matt Swagler said his experience bears out what the research says.
We had somebody who was shot in front of our house, and a bunch of people around all called 911, and it took forever for the ambulance to come, but the cops were right there. This is just down the block, and they were trying to ask the guy all these questions instead of actually trying to, quickly facilitate keeping him alive and make sure it was okay.
Justin Feldman is an NYU researcher who specifically looks at income, race, and policing. He's found that not only are police more likely to be called to low-income communities of color, but people from those communities are far more likely to lose their lives in police incidents.
Lower income communities have higher rates of police going than higher incomes. You also find that majority black communities have higher rates of police killing.
Higher rates of police killing, he says. He also says that newly introduced measures before the city council to divert up to $1 billion in NYPD funding to public health and youth programs and other programs that are non-police are a good start, he says.
Pat, my boy, let's get into it. Over-policing. Based off the video and the conversation and everything that you know about over-policing. Like, what are your overall thoughts about the black community? Is it over-policed? And if so, why is it over-policed?
Yeah, it's over-policed. I don't think that's up for debate. I think what's up to debate is whether or not, it's warranted.
Right.
Or whether or not it's justified. And a lot of that, is going to be place by place. My issue is twofold. On the one hand, you have a bunch of police in the community, which in theory makes the community safer.
In theory.
On the other hand, though, you have the way the police interact with the community itself. And I think that's the area that really needs work when we start talking about community policing, when we start talking about getting making the police a part of the community. You know what I'm saying? Like all of the initiatives you hear people talking about, police need to move into the communities they patrol. They need to live in those communities. People from those communities need to be able to become involved in police in those communities, either through neighborhood watch or through citizen review boards that actually have teeth that can punish police officers or, fire them or whatever the case might be.
Real ones.
Real community citizen review boards. Even when you're talking about, smaller initiatives like the social structures of the community that keep things in place, the social norms, what's acceptable, what's taboo, in terms of utilizing community-based shaming principles. Like, if you're doing something that we as members of the community don't like, we can utilize social tools that get you to feel a sense of shame for doing it. You don't want to do it no more. Go ahead.
All just real quick, all black communities aren't looked at the same. They aren't kept the same. They aren't policed the same. There are varying degrees of how black communities are looked at, or thought about, or lived in, and are policed.
Right. And I think that's where the communities themselves have to take the lead on policing themselves. And I think like that sidewalk justice, as they call it, or the sidewalk policing, or I've heard it referred to many different ways, but that is a critical aspect of it. If people feel socially ostracized by doing a certain behavior in a certain location, they stop doing that behavior. Like, we're social creatures, and we as black people need to take advantage of the fact that we are especially social creatures. We use it in all the wrong ways. If somebody's throwing a party, we turned up. If it's a dance craze or something we find fun, or whatever the case might be, we all about the group, all about the group, all about the group. We all, that FOMO hits black people hard.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to the other aspects of it, like the rugged individualism, even that is something that, as a community, like nowadays, we get mad at neighbors and elders and stuff for jumping in our business. That's a part of it. You know what I'm saying? Allow people to have access to what's going on in your life, in terms of the community safety aspect of it, and then you bring shame back, you bring all of these other social things back. But I don't like anybody that says the communities aren't over policed is not somebody that's having a genuine conversation. Like, that's not somebody that's even trying to figure anything out. That's somebody that just want to have fun talking.
Gotcha.
In my opinion.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. I do agree that black communities are over policed, but of course I'm posing the questions like I am so we can have a conversation. But I do agree that black communities are over policed. But all right, PC, why are black communities over policed in your opinion?
Because they can be.
Boom.
I mean, if you want to maintain your supremacy over a group, then you have to consistently put methods or things in place to remind them that they are indeed under your thumb. And the best way to do that is by taking your what do they call it? Your civilian army, and having them occupy places to keep the natives in line. It's just the same as if you go overseas to a country that's occupied by the American military. I mean, it's allowed to function, but you can sense, and they'll even have military officers playing soccer, doing infrastructure work in those communities, buying off the local grocers and outdoor markets. But at the same time, you understand that they are the law, and it's within their power to enforce the law. And so it's the same thing that takes place here. Now, in regards to why it's specific to our communities, black people weren't brought to America to prosper, to be a part of the American dream. Survivors, first and foremost, had America had its way, there would have never been a civil war. It wasn't to free black people. The Civil War was fought over the economics of those economies and which one would have the most power. I mean, the institution of slavery was that indeed what it was. But that's not, so even in the North, the relationships between blacks and the police has always been adversarial. The first police force in this country were the overseers from the Irish immigrants that came to America under the indentured servitude policies. And once they started revolting with the Africans on these northern plantations in particular, a deal and an agreement was made. We will allow the Irish to join this enclave identified as European power or white power. And then in turn, your reward is we're going to give you weapons, we're going to give you land, we're going to give you access to wealth, but you also have to police those niggers that you was, just running with. And so the relationship has always been adversarial. This is why when they pull up, they just pull up, they whoop ass and ask questions later. And I mean, I was kidnapped by a cops when I was 16 for just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so I can attest to the oppressive natures of cops because none of those police officers got in trouble. You know what I'm saying? And a 16-year-old seeing muzzles in his face, it should have been some consequences to that.
You know what's interesting about you saying that? I'm having a conversation with someone, and they felt like they were harassed by the police because they were pulled over by the police pulling out of a parking lot twice. And when you literally just talked about being taken against your will by the police as an experience. And it made me think about that. Like, okay, so this person over here is complaining, is saying, I'm being harassed by the police, but you were literally, you're saying you were abducted.
Yeah. So, I mean, and listen, I don't discount the person who identified or stated that they were harassed, because that's a terrifying, in today's society, it's a terrifying thing to be a black man and get pulled over by a police officer because your life is in danger, like you're on the clock.
Well, this person wasn't a black man, so.
Oh shit! Okay, yeah. See,
different experience. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So what? That's another thing that made me thinking about it, because we're talking about different experiences. Your experience as a young black man, her experience as a grown black woman. So
yeah, and listen, the sisters have an issue with this too.
They do.
They should, because there are many cases. There was a case, I can't remember the state, where a cop, raped like 17 different women. I think his name was Daniel Hoslaw or some shit like that.
I don't remember his name, but I remember the case, yeah.
Yeah. And so when they asked, one of the young ladies that was on the stand, and these were all black women, and asked them, why didn't you call the authorities? She said, well, who do you want to call on the cops? And that's the understanding, because the blue shield is something to behold. And I'm glad Patrick brought up that, this whole notion of moving police officers or moving police districts into neighborhoods or making police officers live in the city. Or it takes me to this thing where when police officers black police officers will come to my high school and recruit, they would say, you want to make a change, join the police force, and then change it. You can make your change from within. And I always thought that was a silly connotation, because typically the police that was harassing me in my neighborhood were black.
Well, we can see that the ones who telling us that ain't made no change.
Right. Well, and that's because when you take a group of people who are unorganized, their essence gets absorbed by an organized culture.
Well, okay, and I'm glad you went there, because that's kind of where I was going. Because we are over policed, but a lot of our vulnerability comes from our refusal and or inability to unite and be able to better police and protect ourselves and be better to conduct ourselves. We are totally vulnerable to not just the police, any other group of people who want to do something to us.
Yeah. Well, right. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And, and I was telling y'all prior to, us going on air, that I did a presentation for Black History, my presentation, and it was on the miseducation of the Negro. But in even studying for that and understanding, a lot of this takes place because Negroes, Black people, are miseducated and therefore ill-equipped to run our communities and societies.
Right.
But it also made me tap into other things that was going on around that time, such as the 1899 publishing of the Philadelphia Negro by W.E.B. Du Bois, where he came to the 7th Ward of Philadelphia, which happens to be the oldest Black neighborhood in the country. And he did his study. He was invited by the University of Penn to identify the Negro problem. And at that time, it was always called the Negro problem. And it's funny because I was talking to my good brother, Brother Shamari earlier. And he was talking about the fact that you're never going to come to a solution if the only thing you ever do is see Black people as the problem without examining the causes for the problem. And in the Philadelphia Negro, W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois identified the fact that the behavior of Black people in that district, due to poverty, due to overcrowding, and lack of access to resources, that was the symptom. The problem is racism, white supremacy, locking Black people out. And so that hasn't changed. It's transformed, but it hasn't changed. And now you consistently see Elder Neely Fuller stated, you're going to start to see more Black millionaires, but you're going to see the conditions of other Black people suffer.
Get worse.
Right. Because the image is, if I can show you all these millionaires, then it must be something you're not doing. When in fact, these are all tokens allowed to be millionaires just to state that fact, to justify the maltreatment or mistreatment of Black people. We keep calling this shit a war. This is what happens when you're a people that's being warred on.